A new semester at a local community college felt like a blank page, ready to be filled. David, a first-year student who also worked part-time in the campus administration office, felt life was running smoothly. David wasn't the type to seek attention. Big, imposing, yet soft-hearted. Every morning, he went to class calmly, then spent his afternoons helping other students with schedules, payments, and academic paperwork. Simple life. Organized. No real problems. Outside campus, he lived with his girlfriend, Lucy, a cheerful girl who always brought color into his days. Lucy was sociable, made friends easily, and often hosted little gatherings in their apartment. To her, home wasn't just a place to live, it was a place for connection. One night, Lucy came in with exciting news. "I invited a friend from class over tonight for some board games. Her name's Sara. I think you'll really like her. She's super nice." David just nodded, not expecting that a simple get-together would kick off a story that would test his patience, cleverness, and loyalty to a friend. That night, the table was loaded with snacks, laughter, and games. Sara turned out to be someone David vaguely remembered from high school. Not a close friend, just a familiar, friendly face. The meeting was pleasant, even sparking a hope that their circle of friends would grow. David didn't know that behind her warm smile, a conflict was brewing, one that would change everything. Over the next few weeks, Sara came by more often, sometimes for dinner, sometimes to watch movies, or just to chat. Her presence made the apartment feel alive. Lucy loved how close she was getting to her new friend, and David felt comfortable. Sara was friendly and easy to talk to. But there was one thing that unsettled the balance. Jay, Sara's boyfriend, Era's. Jay only showed up occasionally, but whenever he did, the air in the room turned cold. He spoke little, sat stiffly, and seemed like he didn't want to be there at all. Laughter that usually filled the room disappeared whenever he was around. David tried to be friendly, offered food, invited him to join games, but Jay's stare was flat, loaded with unspoken tension. Lucy noticed it too. They continued inviting him, just for Sara's sake, even though the atmosphere turned awkward. One night, after Jay left early, Sara sat quietly, staring into her teacup. Lucy, sensing something, asked gently, "You okay, Sara? You seem down tonight." Sara forced a small smile. "I'm just tired, little things." David noticed but didn't push. Something was being hidden, something that would surface sooner than they realized. Beneath the ordinary night, a storm was quietly forming, and David would soon find himself right in the middle. In the following days, David noticed subtle changes in Sara. Her once genuine smile now seemed forced. Her eyes, once bright and lively, sometimes appeared empty, hiding a heavy secret. Lucy noticed too. She whispered to David when Sara wasn't around. "I'm worried about her. Feels like she's keeping something from us." David just nodded, uneasy. Something told him Jay was behind it. The suspicion grew when one afternoon Sara arrived without notice. She looked exhausted, her hands trembling as she held a small bag. Lucy led her inside gently, while David watched, heart racing. "Sorry, I just showed up," Sara murmured. "I just needed a safe place." Those words froze the room. Safe place? What was really going on with her and Jay? Lucy tried to comfort her with warm tea, but David knew this wasn't a small problem anymore. There was a fracture in Sara's life, and sooner or later, the truth would come out. That night, Sara sat on the sofa, letting the silence sink in. Her hands still shook, even with the warm cup in her grasp. Lucy sat beside her, lightly patting her back, offering comfort. David stayed a few steps away, not wanting to pressure her with too many questions. His mind raced. Sara's words, "I needed a safe place," echoed like an alarm bell he couldn't ignore. "If you need to talk, we're here," Lucy said softly. Sara nodded, eyes glistening, lips sealed tight. The night ended without much explanation. Sara fell asleep in the guest room, and Lucy tucked her in carefully. When the door closed, David and Lucy shared a look in the living room. "She's hiding something," Lucy whispered. David stared at the floor, tension in his jaw. "I know." The next day, Sara went home calmer, but left a huge question mark in David's mind. What was really happening? Days passed, and every time Sara came over, David observed more details. Her fleeting smiles, the way she held back words as if afraid to slip up. It became clear. The storm he feared was real, and it was approaching fast. David knew that sooner or later, something would break, and when it did, life for the three of them would never be the same. The day came sooner than he expected. One night, the house phone rang sharply. Lucy picked up, and her face went pale. It was Sara. Her voice trembled, and even from a few steps away, David could hear her crying. Can I come over now? Please, I don't know where else to go." David grabbed the apartment keys, but Lucy held him back. "She's on her way," she said quietly. Minutes later, a frantic knock at the door. When Lucy opened it, Sara stood there, red-faced, eyes puffy, body slightly shaking. She walked in without a word and collapsed on the sofa, clutching a pillow like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Lucy sat beside her, whispering calming words, while David just stood, heart racing. This time, Sara wasn't holding anything back. Her tears fell relentlessly, voice breaking as she whispered, I can't take it anymore. Jay got so mad at me. He said I betrayed him just because I keep coming here." David felt a surge of anger he'd never known. His large hands clenched, but he knew he couldn't explode in front of her. What Sara needed now was safety, not more fear. Lucy kept whispering reassurances, but David knew this wasn't just jealousy. The storm had erupted, and in his heart, he made one promise. Sara wouldn't face this alone. The next morning, back at the administration office, David tried to bury himself in student files. But Sara's tears haunted him. His eyes drifted to his work computer, where every student's data was stored: schedules, bills, academic status. A sharp thought crossed his mind. If I wanted to, I could make Jay's life a lot harder. David shook his head, pushing the thought away. But the promise he made the night before rang louder than ever. Sara wouldn't have faced this alone. He didn't know it yet, but the small step he would take soon would be the beginning of a big plan, one that would completely change JI's future. Days went on with a new tension in the apartment. Sara still came over, but not just for fun. She came to feel safe, to breathe without Jay's shadow looming over her. Every time she spoke, David felt something growing inside him, a mix of anger and determination. He wasn't much of a talker like Lucy, but he knew one thing: Sara didn't deserve fear. One quiet afternoon, when the administration office was nearly empty, David sat at his desk. He typed Jay's name into the system. Schedule, ID, tuition status, all the info laid out before him. David closed the screen quickly, heart racing. Accessing that info without reason was a serious violation. But the seed of a plan had been planted. He imagined Jay's confusion if everything were to crumble without warning, not with a fight, not with shouting, just by David quietly changing things. That night, over dinner with Lucy and Sara, casual chatter filled the room. David spoke little, listening, observing, sneaking glances at Sara, trying to laugh despite her dim eyes. If I could do something to free her from that shadow, would it be wrong? He thought. The seed of a plan was growing into an unstoppable resolve. A few days later, tension spiked again. Sara arrived with swollen eyes, clearly just crying. She whispered, "Jay, he said I can't come here anymore. If I keep coming, he'll make me regret it." Lucy hugged her, trying to soothe. David stayed silent, body stiff, mind racing. Those weren't mere jealous words. They were a warning. Jay wanted control. Alone in the living room that night, David weighed his options. Do I just sit back while Sara lives in fear? The answer came fast, firm, without doubt. No. The next morning, at work, David typed Jay's name again. Every piece of info, every schedule, every tuition record, it all stared back at him, ready to be used. David drew a deep breath. There was no turning back. He knew if he acted now, Jay's life would change, and that certainty made him steady. You can scare my friends, he thought, but you won't touch them again. With that, the plan that had been a shadow in his mind became real. Sitting alone at his desk, office almost empty, computer screen glowing, David moved the cursor to change Jay's schedule. Heart pounding, he knew one click could fulfill his promise, protecting Sara without raising a hand, without shouting. A doubt surfaced. The risk was huge, his job, his reputation, his future. But then, Sara's tear-streaked face flashed in his mind. The doubt vanished. David pressed the button. One by one, Jay's classes disappeared. Then, new classes were added, ones with extra costs, schedules that would trap him financially. He leaned back, breathless. A faint guilt lingered, but relief was stronger. He had acted. He had chosen which side he stood on. "From now on," David whispered, "your life won't be as easy as it was yesterday, Jay." And that's where the real game began. The next day, David returned to campus with mixed feelings. On one hand, there was relief he had kept his promise to protect Sara. On the other, curiosity and a subtle tension gnawed at his thoughts. How would Jay react? It didn't take long before news reached him through a classmate. Jay had been seen panicking while trying to get into his morning class. He stood frozen at the doorway, flipping through his schedule over and over, then finally walked away in frustration. David held back a small smirk, but his heart stayed guarded. He knew this was only the beginning. Jay would surely find a way to fight back, and when that moment came, things could get much more complicated. That night, Sara came over as usual, but this time, her smile felt a little lighter, a little more genuine. "Today, I didn't have to be afraid in class," she whispered. He wasn't there. David felt a quiet relief, but deep down, he knew this wasn't the end. This was just the opening move in a larger game, one where every step had to be carefully calculated. As Sara drifted to sleep, David sat in the living room, staring at his computer screen again. Satisfaction lingered faintly in his chest, but so did caution. To protect his friends, he would always need to stay one step ahead. And in the dim glow of the lamp, David realized something. This game had only just begun, and the storm he'd unleashed to shield Sara was far from over. The following day, the tension on campus felt sharper. Students whispered in the hallways, some casting him curious glances. David knew things were shifting. Jay was already feeling the impact of his missing schedule and altered classes. In the administration office, a staff member approached him hesitantly. "David, there's a foreign student who panicked because his schedule suddenly changed. You didn't see him around, did you?" David gave a small, calm smile, lowering his gaze to hide his pounding heart. "Oh, maybe it's just a system error." "I'll help check it later," he replied lightly. That evening, Sara showed up again, though her eyes still carried a trace of unease. "I don't feel scared in class anymore," she said with a fragile smile. "But I'm afraid he might try to get back at me." David looked at her with quiet determination. "I'll make sure he never makes you afraid again," he said firmly. But behind his calm words, a heavier truth was dawning on him. His first move had triggered ripples far beyond what he expected. Friends were beginning to ask questions. The campus staff was noting unusual schedule shifts, and David realized every action left a trace. The storm he had started was spreading, and the waves could soon grow too large to control. Day by day, the whispers grew. Friends who once never paid attention were suddenly curious. Administrators started watching the system more closely. And Jay, restless, frustrated, was searching for answers, chasing shadows that David had carefully rearranged. Each night, David sat alone in the dim light of his apartment, staring at the glowing screen, planning his next move. The game was no longer about one clever trick, it had become a constant battle of vigilance, calculation, and risk. And as the storm grew heavier, David whispered to himself in the silence, "I can't step back now. No matter what, Sara has to stay safe, even if it costs me everything." In the days that followed, David felt the emotional weight pressing down on him harder and harder. Every time he saw Sara, his heart raced, caught between the relief of knowing he'd managed to make her feel safe and the anxiety of knowing Jay hadn't given up. That sense of responsibility gnawed at him, making his nights restless and his thoughts heavy. On campus, rumors about Jay's confusion began to spread. Some students speculated about what was going on, while a few staff members quietly noted the oddities. David knew he had to tread carefully. One wrong move could spark trouble not just for Jay, but for himself as well. One late afternoon, Sara showed up at his apartment. Her face was pale, but there was a flicker of relief in her eyes. She admitted she felt safer, but the fear of Jay trying something else lingered. David sat beside her, meeting her gaze with quiet determination. He promised he wouldn't let Jay hurt her again, no matter what it took. But inside, the pressure only grew heavier. He realized this wasn't just about strategy or changing schedules. It was about facing an emotional storm he had never experienced before. Every choice carried weight. Every decision demanded sharper focus, faster thinking, and absolute caution. That night, sitting in front of his computer, David came to a chilling realization. This storm wasn't only about Jay. It was about his own ability to face fear, responsibility, and the consequences of every move he made. As the days passed, Jay's frustration became more obvious. He started asking staff questions, digging for schedule changes, even reaching out to other students. His persistence showed one thing clearly: he wasn't backing down. David sat in his apartment, weighing every possibility. His sense of duty clashed with the fear of what could happen if he slipped up. One mistake could ruin everything for Jay, for Sara, and for himself. Sara came by again, looking tired and worried. She admitted she still felt safer, but she couldn't shake the fear of what Jay might try next. David told her no one would ever make her feel afraid again. His voice was steady, but deep down, he knew those words weren't the end. They were the beginning of something far heavier. That night, David finally accepted a painful truth. If he wanted to keep Sara safe, he'd have to take bigger risks, make sharper moves, and be ready to face whatever consequences came with them. When he returned to campus the next day, every step felt heavier. Every hallway glance, every echo of footsteps, reminded him of the burden he carried. In the administration office, he stared at the computer screen, combing through class schedules, tuition records, and system details with surgical focus. A single adjustment, no matter how small, could trigger something far larger. His next strategy had to be layered, precise, and foolproof. By the afternoon, Sara came by again. Her face showed a fragile calm, but her words carried caution. She didn't want surprises anymore. David reassured her this time he'd make sure it was done right. And yet, even as he spoke with confidence, the emotional weight built higher. He knew this wasn't just strategy, it was survival. Every action had to be calculated, every risk anticipated. A few days later, David saw the results. Jay grew more visibly lost wandering campus, questioning staff and fumbling through dead ends. Rumors swirled, but none led anywhere concrete. David felt a small surge of satisfaction, though he stayed on guard. Sara noticed the shift, too. She told him she no longer felt afraid walking to class. For the first time in weeks, she smiled with a hint of relief. David's chest warmed at the sight, but deep down, he knew this was only the calm before a greater storm. Late at night, he reviewed every schedule and adjustment again, checking every loophole. He knew success now was just the wind before the hurricane. Still, there was one undeniable truth: Sara felt safe. For him, that was victory enough. But peace never lasted long. Jay began turning to official channels, reaching out to campus staff to question schedule changes. David's private war was becoming a real traceable threat. What had once been uncertainty was morphing into danger. Sara grew more anxious. She feared everything could unravel back onto them. David sat quietly, realizing the truth he had tried to avoid. If he wanted to end this, he would need to make the hardest choice yet. A move that could expose everything he had done. That night, staring at his computer screen, he weighed the final risk. Every click felt like a heartbeat, every hesitation like the edge of a cliff. He told himself quietly, this was the hardest decision of his life, but for Sara, he would do it. The next day, the impact was clear. Jay was frustrated, scrambling, and blocked at every turn. He questioned staff, checked with students, but came up empty. Whispers spread, but David stayed composed. Sara arrived at his apartment that evening with a faint smile. She admitted things finally felt under control. David smiled back, warmth in his chest, but caution in his mind. He knew this victory was fragile. That night, David whispered to himself as he shut down his computer. "I took this step for you, Sara. And at least for now, I succeeded." For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a moment of quiet peace. Yet even in that peace, he understood something deeper. Every choice leaves ripples. His moves had changed not just Sara's life, but the pulse of the campus itself. Whispers had spread, patterns had been noticed. Some students grew curious, some staff raised eyebrows. No one accused him, but David felt the silent questions in every glance. The pressure wasn't only from Jay anymore, it was social, emotional, everywhere. Sara admitted the same fear one evening. She felt safe, but she knew all of this had stirred questions they couldn't control. David reassured her with calm conviction. They would handle it wisely. That night, sitting alone, David reflected on everything. He realized the greatest challenge wasn't just protecting Sara from Jay, it was learning how to carry the responsibility of consequences, the ripples of his own actions. And as he sat in silence, he whispered one last truth to himself. Wisdom isn't easy, but it's the only way to keep her safe. In the days that followed, David felt the emotional weight pressing down on him. He had to balance his vigilance, his sense of responsibility, and the desire to keep his own life intact. Every interaction on campus felt like a test. Watchful eyes, hushed conversations, and rumors that forced him to think twice before making any move. At the apartment, Sara showed up looking calmer, but her eyes still carried traces of unease. "I feel safer now," she said softly. "But I can see this is wearing you out too." David looked at her with steady focus. "It is exhausting," he admitted. "But it's a responsibility I have to carry. I'm not giving up, Sara. I'll make sure you stay safe, no matter what." That night, he sat in the living room, closing his eyes for a moment as a wave of emotional fatigue washed over him. Yet behind the exhaustion, there was relief. The protection he'd given her worked, and Sara truly felt safe. In the stillness of the night, David realized something important. Real courage wasn't just about facing external risks, but about enduring the pressure within, staying calm, and keeping focused on his purpose, protecting the person he cared about. With renewed determination, he turned to his computer screen, mapping out the next small steps to keep everything under control, while holding on to his own emotional balance. Weeks passed, and David began to notice stability settling in. Jay no longer showed up anywhere near them, and Sara felt comfortable enough to return to her routine on campus without fear. That small victory was sweet, but David stayed alert for any ripple that might remain. At the apartment, Sara arrived with a brighter smile and eyes that actually sparkled. "I can go to class without feeling scared anymore," she said softly. I'm really grateful, David." He smiled, warmth filling his chest. "That's your courage too. I just made sure you stayed safe. Now we can start looking forward to calmer days," he said with quiet conviction. That night, David sat in the living room, reviewing all the notes and strategies he had put into play. He realized the long-term results weren't just about overcoming Jay, they were about creating safety, learning to face risks, and keeping integrity in every step. In the silence of the night, he whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning of a calmer life. Every effort, every risk I took, it's paying off, and now I can see a better future for Sara." For the first time since the storm began, David felt a steady calm, a victory that wasn't temporary, but one that laid the foundation for safer, more harmonious days ahead. David soon realized that true stability didn't come from temporary victories. He and Sara needed to strengthen the foundation of their new life together so they could face any challenges that might still lie ahead. They began talking about long-term plans, setting up daily routines, keeping their communication open, and creating simple strategies to protect their safety and comfort on campus. "We've been through so much, but a strong foundation will keep us steady whenever challenges show up," David said, looking into Sara's eyes. "I agree. We're no longer just surviving. We're building a life that feels stable," Sara replied, with quiet determination. That night, they sat on the balcony, staring at the stars, breathing in a calmness that once felt impossible. David realized that true courage wasn't only about facing danger head-on, but also about building trust, consistency, and daily habits that made life solid and unshakable. In the stillness of the night, he whispered to himself, "This is the start of a stronger life. We are ready to face anything together because our foundation can't be shaken." And there, with peaceful hearts and clear minds, David and Sara felt the strength of a life built on stability, safety, and harmony, a foundation that would carry them into the future. A few days later, a small obstacle appeared, a misunderstanding among friends on campus that created a little tension. It wasn't serious, but enough to make Sara anxious and David cautious. "David, I don't want this turning into something bigger," Sara said softly. "I know, and we won't let it. Sometimes these little bumps just need patience and communication," David reassured her, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. He decided to handle the situation with wisdom. He brought everyone together, calmly explained the facts, and made sure each side understood what really happened. Slowly, the tension eased and things warmed back to normal. That night, sitting again on the balcony, they shared a small smile of relief. David realized that handling the small stuff with a cool head was just as important as surviving the big storms. In the quiet night, he whispered to himself, "This was a small challenge, but the lesson is still valuable. Every test teaches us to be wiser, stronger, and more grateful." And there, beneath the starlit sky, David and Sara felt content, knowing that no matter the size of the challenge, they now had the strength and wisdom to face it together. The following days brought even more peace. Sara joined her classes and social activities without fear, while David felt relieved watching the campus slowly adapt to their new rhythm. What was once stressful now felt warm and welcoming. "David, it feels like all the bad stuff is behind us," Sara said with a smile. "Yeah. Now it's time to enjoy the calm and the happiness," David answered, gazing at her with care. That night, they watched the city lights shimmer in the distance. David realized that true peace wasn't just the absence of problems, but the reward of patience, communication, and courage through every wave they had faced. In the stillness, he whispered to himself, "Every effort, every step we took led us here. Now we can truly enjoy life together." And under the calm night sky, they felt the deep harmony of a life that was safe, steady, and filled with hope. Weeks passed, and their daily routine grew stronger. Each morning started with breakfast together, where they'd talk about the day ahead and remind each other of small tasks. Those simple habits made them closer and gave their life a rhythm that was both stable and comforting. "David, I love starting the day like this. Everything just feels easier," Sara said warmly. "Yeah, it's amazing how the little things make such a big difference," David replied with a smile. At night, they'd sit on the balcony, sipping something warm, sharing stories of gratitude. David realized that real happiness came not from dramatic events, but from consistency in those little positive routines. In the quiet, he whispered to himself, "We've survived the storms, handled the small waves, and now it's these daily habits that keep our peace alive. Each little step brings us closer to a harmonious life." And there, in the soft glow of the night, David and Sara felt the deep calm of knowing that true stability came from patience, consistency, and love. One evening, beneath a clear sky full of stars, they reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "David, sometimes I forget just how heavy everything used to be," Sara said softly. "I know. But every step carried us here, to this peaceful night. We made it through all of it. Together," David answered, his eyes full of meaning. They talked about what they had learned, that courage wasn't just about facing obvious danger, but also about handling everyday fears. That strength wasn't only in big actions, but in the persistence of small, steady choices. In the quiet, David whispered to himself, "We've weathered storms, faced small waves, and learned from each trial. Now, this whole journey feels like the source of our strength." And there, beneath the shining stars, they felt grateful, knowing that every step, every decision, every act of courage had built the life they now enjoyed. With clear minds and peaceful hearts, they began planning their future, not out of fear, but out of hope. They wrote down simple goals, maintained their positive routines, nurture their friendships, and keep supporting each other through whatever came next. No more drama, no looming threats, just consistency, wisdom, and growing love. In the night's stillness, David whispered, "The future doesn't scare me anymore. We've learned from the past, handled every storm and ripple, and now we're ready for better days together." And there, on their warm balcony, David and Sara felt certain. Their life was now built on a foundation that couldn't be shaken, a foundation of love, wisdom, and harmony that would carry them forward. Their story didn't end with a dramatic clash or a grand victory. It ended with calm, gratitude, and quiet joy, a reminder that even in a world full of storms, with courage, wisdom, and the support of someone you love, you can build a life of true peace and happiness.